militia.
Witnesses are back on the stand in the Derek Chauvin trial. I'm Michael George in Minneapolis with the testimony from an EMT who says she was prevented from helping George Floyd.
And the battle over educational benefits for student athletes heads to the Supreme Court.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
A Missouri Senate committee debates a controversial piece of legislation that would resurrect the state's 250-year-old civilian Minutemen militia. This is KOAM News at Noon. I'm Tanya Bach. Tapping our first 7 minutes, legislation introduced by State Senator Bill White from Joplin. Legislation that's designed to create a registry of armed volunteers in Missouri. The Senate General Laws Committee is holding a hearing on Senate Bill 528 today. Jessica Hart has the latest from Jefferson City.
In the time of dire emergency and having Second Amendment.
During the American Revolutionary War, Minutemen were armed civilian colonists. Fast forward nearly 250 years, a Missouri state senator wants to bring back that tradition.
The Minutemen component provides the opportunity for Missouri residents to be able to volunteer in the time of an extreme emergency to support the needs of the state.
Bill White says if an Armageddon type of event was to occur, Missouri could need the Minutemen.
We live in a very turbulent time, and the possibility, whether it be by man-made or natural disaster, that we go to a civilization-threatening event. This does allow a pool of manpower. And that is, by the way, it's not a military force. We specifically exclude National Guard, the militia.
The proposed qualifications are simple. Missouri residents who legally can own firearms would put their names and addresses on a list kept by the Department of Public Safety, a list not shared with anyone and outside the Sunshine Law.
The anonymity issue of not knowing who or who is not a part of this, if anything, I think makes this a nightmare for coordination.
Peter Lucier, a Marine Corps veteran, says he's concerned this group could give a home to extremists.
A bill like this really has the power to bolster and encourage growing, particularly right-wing anti-government extremism.
And he doesn't think this armed defense group should be given power during a crisis.
A bunch of kind of ragtag forces coming together who have been anonymous until being called up by the governor certainly doesn't seem like an effective force to combat these civilization-threatening events.
In a civilization-threatening event, Senator White says the governor, with consent of 3/4 of the General Assembly, could call upon the armed group. But Lucier says the creation of an armed group outside of law enforcement and public safety officials is concerning.
Joplin police open an investigation after residents find letters on their doors threatening to euthanize stray and feral cats. Monday, residents in the Gray Avenue neighborhood found the letters on their properties, which had been left overnight. The letter says any stray cat captured in the neighborhood will be euthanized starting January 1st. Residents put together a roughly $2,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Well, Mother Nature is threatening us with some freezing temps overnight. Michael Hazup joins us with the first look at the forecast.
I thought as that calendar progressed toward, more of a spring, summer-like feel, we were able to escape this. But Tanya, you nailed it. Nailed it on the head right there. It is going to be a chilly one tonight. And the big difference, look at those wind arrows now moving in due north. Now, the nice thing is it certainly hasn't been as blustery as what it was past couple of days. We're just ranging really between, say, 5 to 15 miles per hour, but it certainly does make a difference temperature-wise. 51 in Joplin, 54 in Parsons. Still only 47 right now in Nevada. Cloud cover that we had this morning, now a thing of the past. Watch it move off to the east as we're going to have beautiful, beautiful clear skies. But the big difference is after we hit sunset, because after a nice afternoon, say, 7:40, will be when it dips down below the horizon. Look at what we've got on our hands. A freeze warning that stretches from tonight all the way into the 1st of April until 9 a.m. So any of that vegetation, put plants outside, they're hanging up, you want to bring them in. If you just planted the garden, you want to cover them up, because we'll have wind chills as low as, say, 24, 25, and temps hanging in between 29 and 32. One-shot deal, though, Tanya. Back up into the 60s by the time we reach the weekend. Still looking at a gorgeous, gorgeous Easter Sunday. Coming up here in just a little bit, with tomorrow being the 1st of April. That means it's time to backtrack, take a look at March, take a look at where we are in meteorological spring, and you're going to be amazed by the numbers and how close they are as far as what we've got since January 1 compared to March 1.
I am interested in the change. All right, thanks, Michael. Well, witness testimony resumes in day 3 of the Derek Chauvin trial. The fired Minneapolis police officer is charged with murder and manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Michael George is outside the courthouse in Minneapolis with the latest.
The cashier who interacted with George Floyd just before he was killed last May testified on the witness stand in the Derek Chauvin trial. He says during a quick conversation he had with Floyd, he thought Floyd appeared to be under the influence of something.
It kind of took him a little long to get to what he was trying to say, so it would appear that he was high.
EMT and firefighter Genevieve Hansen was back on the stand after her tearful testimony Tuesday, recounting how officers prevented her from helping Floyd.
He said something along the lines of, if you really are a Minneapolis firefighter, you would know better than to get involved.
Tuesday's witnesses also included Darnella Frazier, who recorded the widely seen video of Floyd's death.
It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life.
The jury's been listening closely to all the emotional testimony. When Frazier was on the stand, one juror, who's a grandmother and child psychologist, was taking notes. Derek Chauvin's defense has tried to prove that the on-scene witnesses were a potential threat to officers and might have distracted them from arresting Floyd.
You called him a bum at least 13 times.
That's what you counted in the video?
That's what I counted.
And that's what you got, 13.
Those terms grew more and more angry.
They grew more and more pleading for life when I stayed in my body. You can't pay me out to be angry.
Witnesses testified no bystander interfered with police. The defense has also argued that Chauvin did as he was trained and that Floyd's death was caused by a combination of illegal drug use and heart disease. Michael George, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Chauvin faces up to 40 years in prison if convicted of the most serious charge against him. That's a look at today's top stories and weather in our first 7 minutes. Up next on KOAM, News at Noon.
The case of college athletes goes before the Supreme Court. I'm Natalie Brand with the issue that's pitting players against the NCAA.
And later, we're making an herb-crusted lamb with mint sauce in the Mr. Food Test Kitchen. While most brackets submitted to March Madness pools are in sad shape by this stage of the tournament, the NCAA will come out a winner, netting more than $1 billion in revenue this year. Now, much of it from the men's and women's basketball tournaments. Natalie Brand is in Washington, where the Supreme Court is taking up a case that could change the way student athletes are compensated.
It's over!
The Final Four is set in the NCAA basketball tournament, and when the nets are cut down next week, March Madness will have brought in about $750 million for the Athletic Association. Michigan basketball player Isaiah Livers told ESPN that players don't get their fair share.
I feel like a university or NCAA or a conference can make so much money off one name, and the guy who's like putting all the work in to get to that point gets nothing out of it.
Student athletes are not paid for their services, but instead receive scholarships to go to school. Former men's and women's athletes are fighting to remove a cap on compensation, which would give them additional educational benefits such as computers, science equipment, and musical instruments. Jeffrey Kessler is the plaintiff's attorney.
I don't think there's a fan out there who doesn't think it would be okay if the coaches made a few $1 million less, and these athletes could get things like graduate school scholarships and everything else that other students can get.
The NCAA argues expanding benefits could lead to abuses. It cited internships as an example, writing in a court briefing, it would be easy for schools to label such internships related to education, even if a star athlete was given, say, a 6-month internship at a sneaker company or auto dealership that paid $500,000. The NCAA is in the process of changing its rules which would allow athletes to earn money outside of their scholarships. The new rules would allow them to profit from their own names, images, and likeness. That could pave the way for athletes to earn money off of deals such as endorsements, personal appearances, or sponsorships. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
Now, the court is not expected to issue its ruling until late June. Still to come on the KOAM News at noon, Mr. Food.
Looking to make something new for Easter? We've got a main dish that'll melt in your mouth.
But first, Michael Hayslip returns with your complete forecast.
Wrapping up the last day of March, it's amazing how fast time has flown so far in 2021. And I really want to concentrate on our monthly and yearly precipitation. For both these numbers, go back to March 1 to where we are right now. So just the span of 1 month, pick up 5.4 inches. That's pretty impressive right there. Historically, our average month would be just about 3.3 inches. So imagine this, for the month we're 2.12 inches above normal. Now, if we go ahead and tack on January and February, in other words, we go back to January 1, we're 2.13 inches above normal. I couldn't make that up. We are off 1/100th of an inch, whether you break it down from a 31-day perspective or whether you break it down from a 3-month perspective. Now, put that into perspective. This time last year, for the year, we were almost at 14 inches. But nice thing about it is this is the first time we've actually brought out the drought monitor in 2021. We don't see anything popping up. Of course, they do need the rain out on the west. Wildfire season about to begin. Had an interesting question earlier. Somebody behind the camera here asking me about why the coast would end up in the dry area because of all the thunderstorm activity that they've had lately. Well, you've got to remember, there's about a 6-month time frame for you to sink into a drought and about an 8 to 10-month time frame for you to get out of a drought. So even though they have been hitting with thunderstorm activity, also too, there hasn't been a whole lot of rain right along the Gulf Coast. It's kind of taken this line through central Arkansas, northern Mississippi, and Alabama into Georgia. And that's where we see the thunderstorm activity moving from Arkansas all the way up to just about Maine. Live look outside of Television City. It was overcast earlier this morning, but now with the sunshine, able to make it up into 52s and not fighting the wind of 20 to 25 miles per hour. We'll be able to ride 10 to 15 miles per hour for the rest of the day. 51 in Joplin, a little bit warmer out to the west right there. 54s in Independence, Parsons, and Oswego compared to 49 in Monette. My good friend Mike checking down with me in Goodman, Missouri. He says he's got 49 as well. Now the cloud cover that we had earlier moved off to the east. Really didn't have a whole lot of rain this morning. A couple raindrops just south of I-44 in between Joplin and Neosho right there, but that's a thing of the past. And the warmer temperatures, yeah, Oklahoma gets to enjoy those because we've got the jet stream grabbing that cold Canadian air and going to be with us for the next 2 days. But most importantly, it's what transpires overnight. As our weather trend slowly working us down, sunset, say about 7:40, and after the sun sinks, it's going to get cold, and it's going to get cold fast to the point where we've got to break out a freeze warning for the first day of April. So if you have any of that plants outside, flowers, I know that's not only with the nice days that we had, but of course, maybe getting ready with some Easter decorations as well. Either number one, bring them inside, or number two, make sure they are covered up. And this gives you an idea of the freeze warnings. Even if you live over in southeast Kansas right here, the best thing to do would be on the smart side. Take care of the vegetation. Difference between the purple and the turquoise, we're in a freeze warning. That means it's imminent. It's going to happen. Down there in, say, Washington County in northeast Oklahoma, that's a freeze watch. So that's kind of stay on your toes. Now, for us, it's going to sink down where we're going to have temperatures in between 29 and 32 degrees. And also, too, Tanya, that means when we wake up tomorrow, factor in that north wind, feeling about like 24.
Ooh, that's going to be cold.
Thank you, April. And I had somebody that did a little tongue-in-cheek on me earlier. No, this is not an April Fool's Day joke.
No, it's not.
No, it is not.
Bundle up on the first day of April. All right, we'll be prepared. Thanks, Michael. We take this time to honor today's four-state hero, Sergeant Billy Ross in the U.S. Army. Soldier from Cushing, Oklahoma, joined the 65th Infantry Division in 1952. He fought in Korea until 1954, earning the Korean Service Medal with 2 Bronze Stars. the United Nations Service Medal, and the Combat Infantry Badge. To Sergeant Billy Ross, we thank you, our four-state hero. Instead of cooking ham or prime rib for Easter, why not try something new this year? Howard shows us how to make his herb-crusted lamb with mint sauce in the Mr. Food Test Kitchen.
Every year, right before Easter, we get lots of questions from folks looking for something different to serve for the holiday. So rather than giving you a new way to cook a ham or roast a prime rib, we thought we'd show you how to prepare a rack of lamb. And with it being one of the best food buys of the week, all the better. Just in case you're not familiar with rack of lamb, it looks like this. Each one of these is considered a rack, with the meaty loin in the center and the rib bones attached to it. Instead of cutting these into chops, we coat them with a mixture of olive oil, onion and garlic powder, salt, pepper, fresh rosemary, and we roast them whole. While they're in the oven, we make a sauce to serve with them. It's simply mint jelly simmered with a splash of red wine and a sprig of fresh rosemary. Once the internal temperature of the lamb reaches 145, which is medium rare, we take them out of the oven to rest. Then we carve them between the bones and finish them with our mint wine reduction. It may sound and taste fancy, but it's so easy. To get the recipe for our herb-crusted lamb with mint sauce, simply visit our website, so you'll have it in plenty of time for Easter. I'm Howard in the Mr. Food Test Kitchen, where today we found a welcoming new way for you to say, ooh, it's so good.
You can find this recipe along with a lot more good food from the Mr. Food Test Kitchen online. Just go to our website at KOAMnewsnow.com. Here's a look at our four-state market prices.
It begins after the sun goes down at 7:40. Temperatures dropping below the freezing mark. Freeze warning for our counties indicated in purple. It is a one-shot deal, but make sure you take care of those plants, and then we'll have 60s by the time we get to Easter weekend.
What do we have coming up tonight at 5, Dal?
Well, at 5, a new study finds potentially dangerous chemicals in tap water samples taken around the country. We're going to look at health concerns from long-term exposure. Plus, after 30 years, McDonald County Sheriff's Office identifies the body of Grace Doe. We'll have the details. And former Kansas resident Gene Bicknell talks about continued legal tax issues with the state of Kansas. He says the state owes him tens of millions of dollars. Join us for those stories, a lot more KOAM News at 5.
All right, thank you, Dal. Thanks for joining us for KOAM News at Noon. We'll see you right back here at 5 o'clock.